Major funding for NJ Spotlight News is provided in part by NJM Insurance Group, serving the insurance needs of residents and businesses for more than 100 years. From NJPBS Studios, this is NJ Spotlight News with Brianna Venozzi.
Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Raven Santana in for Brianna Venozzi. We're bringing you a special NJ Spotlight News edition of Reporters Roundtable with Joanna Gagas, who has a roundup of the top political stories of the week with the help of a panel of local journalists. But first, a few of today's top headlines. New Jersey's new plan to create a state website where people can upload videos of ICE activity in the state is already drawing mixed reaction. Some immigrant advocates say the proposal from Governor Mikey Sherrill may miss the moment, especially as tensions around immigration enforcement continue to rise. The governor says the portal is meant to increase transparency and document federal enforcement actions. However, critics worry a government-run system may not move fast enough to warn communities when agents are operating in their neighborhoods and question whether it would actually protect vulnerable residents. Republican state leaders are also criticizing the plan, saying it undermines law enforcement. Sherrill's stance on immigrant protection is also putting her at odds with some advocates. A spokesperson for the governor says she supports enshrining the state's current policy into law that limits when local police can cooperate with federal immigration agents, but she does not appear to back a bill Governor Murphy rejected on his way out of office that would have limited cooperation even further. Both have said they had concerns that the legislation could invite legal challenges and attacks by the federal government. Lawmakers plan to reintroduce the bill soon. Also tonight, New Jersey is urging residents to sign up for health care on the state marketplace before open enrollment ends on January 31st, even as they face significant cost increases. Consumers here and nationwide are getting hit by a double whammy of higher premiums due to expired federal tax credits and the overall rising cost of health care. In New Jersey, that'll mean an average increase of nearly $2,800 a year. The State Department of Banking and Insurance says that's led more residents here to buy down from silver plans to bronze, which come with lower monthly premiums but have higher deductibles and copays. And overall, the number of new consumers enrolling in coverage on the state marketplace has dropped by nearly 30% for the upcoming plan year. Nearly 500,000 residents get their health insurance through Get Covered NJ if they can't get covered through an employer, Medicare, or Medicaid. In New Jersey, health coverage is still required, and residents who fail to enroll and don't qualify for an exemption will get hit with a penalty at tax time. And voters casting their ballots by mail in the special election for Congress in District 11, take note, new rules from the U.S. Postal Service mean that some mail might no longer get a same-day postmark. That's a result of cost-cutting measures that could delay mail from arriving at processing facilities. Mail will be postmarked the day it's processed, not the day it's mailed. And ballots that aren't postmarked by 8 p.m. on Election Day may not be counted. Election officials are urging voters to put their ballots in special ballot drop boxes to ensure they're counted, or to drop off ballots in person at your county board of elections. The crowded Democratic primary includes 11 candidates who are actively campaigning for the nomination to replace Governor Mikey Sherrill, including former Congressman Tom Malinowski, Essex County Commissioner Brendan Gill, labor activist Ana Lilia Mejia, and former Lieutenant Governor Tahisha Way. One Republican candidate, Joe Hathaway, is running unopposed. Early in-person voting started Thursday and runs until Tuesday, February 3rd at limited polling locations. Primary day is Thursday, February 5th, and the general election will be April 16th. And those are our top headlines. Reporters Roundtable begins right now.
Major funding for Reporters Roundtable is provided by RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
If there was a word of the week, it would be ICE. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. I'm Joanna Gagis, and this is Reporters Roundtable, the show where we round up a panel of journalists to talk all about the latest week of New Jersey news. Let's get started and meet our panel. With us today is Colleen O'Day, senior writer and projects editor for NJ Spotlight News. We have Kenny Burns, New Jersey reporter for WHYY, and Scott Fallon, reporter with NorthJersey.com and USA Today Network. Well, we started the week with a massive winter storm. It blanketed the state in snow and ice, leading to a state of emergency, closed schools, transit troubles that have continued throughout the week for anyone trying to get around. At the same time, we watched another American citizen be shot and killed by ICE immigration officers on the streets of Minneapolis. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about today, but let's start with that ICE activity. Scott, I'm going to start with you. There's been bipartisan concern over the tactics used by ICE this past week. What have you heard from Governor Sherrill in response?
Well, her big announcement this week was to create this portal in which citizens would be able to share their videos, photos of ICE on the streets of New Jersey. It kind of just shows you how limited state government is in dealing with ICE, because there's just not too much they can do in terms of dealing with an escalation. Minnesota is seeing that right now. It's seen it throughout the entire winter. And really, you have to see some moves come out of Washington to really see some type of de-escalation there.
Yeah, she talked about on the Daily Show this week, she talked about making this database. She sure does love a database. We've heard a lot about different various databases since she's taken office. But she says to people, keep your phones out, keep recording, keep monitoring any activity that you see. But there is something perhaps she could do here in New Jersey. She could sign and codify into law the Immigrant Trust Directive. Scott, have you heard any further commitment from her on that issue or divergence away from it?
She's kind of not showing her cards on that. Obviously, she has been extraordinarily critical of what's happening in Minnesota and of ICE in general. And, is there a chance that she will move ahead with that? Absolutely. But we'll have to see.
Ken, we have seen ICE activity playing out here on the streets of New Jersey, several towns, several municipalities and cities. There's been ICE enforcement in Atlantic City. What's happening there? I know you've been covering it. How are city officials responding?
City officials in Atlantic City, they're standing by their immigrant communities. Mayor Marty Small spoke about how they had to cancel a whole multicultural parade because of concerns from the community about ICE using that as a place to round up people. In Camden, the city council president, Angel Fuentes, sent a letter to Governor Sherrill asking her to take a look at the Immigrant Trust Directive, codifying the Immigrant Trust Directive. And by all signs, at least as of this morning, it looks like they may be open to that.
Obviously, that'll take some work going through the legislature again. The measure failed at the end of the lame duck session. Governor Murphy pocket vetoed 2 of those bills. Kenny, do you think that this legislature right now is positioned and has the political will to move those bills quickly through?
The key word is quickly. And Governor Murphy, when he was leaving office, left some Easter eggs for the legislature to consider as they recraft this bill. His main concern, if anybody remembers, is that it will go through another round of court challenges and we might not be so lucky as far as codifying it, but it's a new administration. They do have some guidance and the will's there. It's just how quickly will they move, because the first time it took at least a year or 2 to get it to the governor's desk.
But would you argue, Kenny, that this is a different time? There's a different feeling right now, and that perhaps this is something that there's a lot of political will and motivation to pass through quickly?
Oh, absolutely. You're seeing critics of President Trump. Not critics, supporters of President Trump finally raising some concerns and giving their criticism in regards to how ICE has been behaving in Minnesota, particularly in the last week with the shooting death of Alex Preddy.
Colleen, politics are certainly at play everywhere you look in the state of New Jersey, across this country. We saw Governor Sherrill come out and say, look, the Trump administration has included New Jersey on a list of 14 states that are being investigated for how they spend their federal funds. First, just tell us what's happening with that investigation.
So what we know is that the states that are being investigated are all states that voted for Kamala Harris and not Donald Trump in 2024. She's called it a blatantly political investigation. I mean, it's kind of hard to say it isn't, given that it is of blue states, as we call them. The idea coming from the Trump administration is that they are looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, those three words that we often hear when politicians are trying to talk about money being spent. There's obviously billions of dollars that we get in federal funds as well as other states. And I think when you have all of that money, there's got to be some little bit at least that goes by the wayside, maybe that isn't fully accounted for. I'm not sure there's enough to, make any big deal over it. But certainly in New Jersey, we have had, at least in the last administration, a very strong comptroller who was finding something like $100 million a year in fraud, at least in the Medicaid program. So I'm not sure what's going to come of this ultimately, but it certainly is something that is of concern to the Sherrill administration.
Yeah, also of concern to the Sherrill administration is the president's doubling down on canceling the funding for the Gateway Tunnel project. What's going on there, Colleen?
Yeah, so, here we are again. This was announced back in October when Sherrill was running for governor, and she criticized it then. She's critical again. She continues to call the funding freeze illegal. She said that the other day she called Donald Trump to talk to him about it, and she hasn't heard back from him yet. But she wants him to know that this impacts thousands and thousands of jobs. There's a $40 billion economic impact in this region because of this tunnel. If people can't get back and forth, and it's not just people going from New York to New Jersey or vice versa. I mean, this is also Amtrak trains would be using this. So it's a huge deal. So she keeps talking tough, but, her tough talk is not something that President Trump has really appreciated in other places. And it seems to bring his wrath down upon a governor when they do that. So I'm not sure what we're going to see happening as a result.
And this is a $16 billion project, and we do know that every Democrat in New York and New Jersey this week sent a letter to the Trump administration asking that he promptly release those funds. But like you said, I'm not sure that she's engendered herself to the president in these first 2 weeks of her office. She clearly doesn't intend to do that. She clearly is coming out swinging intentionally. Scott,
that's right.
Go ahead,
and Joanna,
Colleen.
just in case I didn't note this, the Gateway officials say that if they don't get more money, they're going to stop construction next Friday, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a loss of a whole lot of jobs, as you said. But the broader impacts and what it costs then to get those projects back up and running, we know there's additional investments that then have to be made. As all of that plays out here in New Jersey, federally, we're seeing a spending bill that's once again come down to the 11th hour. Scott, one of the things that Democrats have fought for is a stop to this DHS spending, although we know that President Trump and Republicans funded DHS and ICE operations through the end of his term, so that there's really not a negotiating point there. But Democrats are also very loudly calling for an extension of these ACA credits, the Affordable Care Act credits. Just, Scott, can you explain what is happening with the deadline of those credits and what they're asking for?
Well, the House passed earlier this month a bill that would extend those credits for 3 years. So now it goes to the Senate, where it doesn't look like it has much support. So the Department of Banking, the New Jersey Department of Banking, yesterday actually put out some data, and it shows that those who are enrolled in New Jersey's program, ACA program, that 30% of them are going with the bare bones health insurance plan, up from 16% last year. So the premiums are very high, and people are going with less insurance or lesser insurance than they have in the past.
Yeah, and Scott, nationally, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm going from memory here, but I believe that ACA enrollment dropped by about 1 million people across the country, right down from 24 million to 23 million, somewhere around there. Help me fill in those numbers.
It did. It dropped 1 million. In New Jersey, they have about 30% fewer new enrollees for the 2026 year, and then compared to 2025. So it's down, and it's not surprising. You have to realize that you saw a tremendous skyrocketing premiums across the board, as high as 175% in some cases for New Jersey's ACA market. And people are just can't afford it. That's what it comes down to.
But help us understand this, because this is one area where we've actually seen a bit of bipartisan communication in Washington. There's been a deep divide along most issues of the day, but we have seen Republicans start moving, I'd say, center on this and saying, look, our constituents are being hurt by this also. What have we seen so far, although we know that negotiations aren't final in the spending bill?
Well, you hear it from the Republicans. The House had Republicans vote on this bill. They had to have it for it to pass. But the Senate, you're not hearing that. The House, you kind of have more town halls. You have people, you have your constituents talking to you, and people in Republican districts want this as much as people in Democratic districts.
We're going to switch gears. Kenny, we talked about that winter storm that hit us really hard. A lot of people still dealing with snow and struggling with their commutes. How would you assess Governor Sherrill's handling, preparedness of that storm? It was her first true test, and it came really early.
It did, and overall, I would give high marks. Now, keep in mind, I am a Marylander this is the state I came from, so I'm a native Marylander. But so instantly, New Jersey already handles snow a little bit better than we do. But the fact that we were able to get up and around a couple of days after the storm, there are a couple of minor things. Particularly, there's a ramp that goes from Route 1 to 295 around Lawrence Township. It's still one lane, but it was a lane, not like a path that I've seen in Maryland years and years ago. And then they're still following up, as far as, at least on my commute, they're following up with cleaning up the snow piles along Route 1. And then even going through Camden County and Burlington County, good job overall. And I haven't heard anybody really complain about the lack of planning on the state, or at least getting back up and running. NJ Transit was back up Tuesday at the earliest, if I recall. So she might have bested her predecessor and Governor Chris Christie on this one.
Yeah, they both were hit hard by winter storms that they were not prepared for. She did, as you said, she came out early. She communicated with county and local officials. There were no deaths. We often talk about and we highlight when things go wrong. We don't always look back when things go well. We just kind of keep moving forward. You think, would you say, if you gave her a grade, what would you grade her?
I guess I would give her an A. I'm not going to be like some college professors. No shade to college professors overall, but if someone gets an A, just give them an A.
We don't need to make it a B or an A plus, B plus.
Right.
Okay. Colleen, we have an election on a random Thursday in February. Happens to be my birthday, as a matter of fact.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Yes.
11 in 11. What is going on in CD 11?
Yeah, these openings don't come up very often. So when they do, a lot of people decide, hey, this is my shot. And with the decline of county party power, obviously the county line is dead, but that doesn't mean that all county party power is dead. People kind of felt like this would be their shot. So there are 13 Democratic names on the ballot. 2 have dropped out in terms of campaigning. So, but they could still get votes because they're on the ballot.
And this is a timing issue, right? In terms of when the ballots were printed and when they dropped out.
Right. As far as I know, I think they're all on, but I mean, they're all on at least one of the county's ballots. I would have to check the others. But anyway, there are 11 candidates. There are a number of candidates who are really pretty well, you know, well known, or at least who have some pretty strong credentials. I would think that you have on the Democratic side 4 front runners. You've got the former Congressman Tom Malinowski. You've got Brendan Gill, who is an Essex County Commissioner and who's got the county line in Essex. Again, the county line can be given, but it's just not a county line ballot that we're seeing anymore. You've got Tahisha Way, the former Secretary of State, former Lieutenant Governor, who has gotten a lot of monetary backing from the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association. I think it's approaching $2 million now, so a lot of ads for her. And you've also got Ana Lilia Mejia, who is the progressive choice, or at least the progressive, organization choice.
And
the
she's
Working
picked
Family
up.
Party's New Jersey is
She's
behind
picked up
her.
some major endorsements, right, Colleen? Talk about the progressives who've endorsed her nationally.
I mean, I think it's just about everybody. Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan Omar. I mean, she's got all of the big name progressives behind her. And the interesting thing about this, on the Democratic side, again, I think you showed there's one Republican on the ballot, Joe Hathaway. He's going to obviously get the nod. But on the Democratic side, with 11 candidates, you can potentially win this with fewer than 10% of the vote. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'll be closer to 20%, maybe more than that, maybe closer to what Cheryl got last year, which was in the 30s. But I mean, that's amazing.
How much of this, Colleen, comes down to organizational support? You said that the county party, effort still exists. It really does come down to organizational support and who can mobilize voters and get them out, like we said, on a random Thursday. Who do you think has that strongest ground game?
I mean, certainly in Essex County, you've got to give it to Brendan Gill because he has the Essex County machine behind him, and they have always been a very strong organization. They've always been able to get people out. He's also got an awful lot of support from unions, kind of the workers' unions, carpenters, those kind of guys, and they've always got a good ground game. On the other hand, Malinowski has got name recognition. He's well known. He's got some pretty strong support in Morris County. You've got Ana Lilia in terms of the progressive movement. The Working Families Party worked hard last year and helped to, Ras Baraka didn't win the nomination for governor, but he came awful close. He came in second. And Working Families Party did a lot of work for the New Jersey City mayor. So, they're a pretty strong group, and they've been knocking on doors just about every day for Mejia.
Yeah, well, we're going to see. We're going to be following it. Kenny, really quickly, Governor Murphy, on his way out, made no shortage of enemies with a couple different moves. One of them has incited some anger, I would say, within his own party. A clemency policy that's been in place where governors can pardon people. He pardoned a mom who had been found guilty of burning her 2 young children alive. It's just a horrific story. She, at one point, it was considered to perhaps get the death penalty. Now we see Democratic Senator Vin Gopal introducing legislation to change those clemency policies. What can you tell us about it?
Well, it's going to be a challenge because, as I learned when I was writing that story, it's a constitutional power that's been around for going on 8 decades. Before that, the governor shared the power with what would be the modern New Jersey Supreme Court. So I have to look at the bill, admittedly, but it would really have to. You really have to check the constitutional powers on this one, and look.
And Kenny, if it's going to be a constitutional amendment, that needs to go before the voters of New Jersey. Yes.
Yeah, it has to go to the voters of New Jersey, and constitutional amendments are already it's a tough thing to do already. So we'll see how this one goes.
I'll tell you what, though, when it comes to this issue, there's been frustration on both sides of the political aisle. We saw President Biden pardon his son Hunter. We saw President Trump pardon the January 6th insurrectionists. Do you think that this is something New Jersey voters would get behind, Kenny?
It's hard to say because I mean I could see them getting behind some type of reform, but again, we're dealing with the Constitution, and we're dealing with trying to get people to understand why this is important.
All
and
right,
it's a both sides problem.
Close us out with this show by giving us the latest that just came out. We have a minute left. What's happening with Norcross in South Jersey?
So the appellate division upheld the dismissal of the indictment from last year. It was argued right after the gubernatorial election, and in short, the appellate division sided with the trial judge and his reasoning for the most part.
And George Norcross, I should make it clear.
Yes.
Were you surprised by that, Kenny?
I was not surprised by that, to be honest. RICO indictments are already difficult, but at the same time, it took a long time for this decision to come out.
Yeah.
And probably because of all the different complexities. And then on top of that, you're talking about a situation that started easily 15 years ago now, almost.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. Sorry to cut you off right there, but thank you so much to all of you for being with us today. And to our viewers, you can follow me on Instagram at Joanna Gagis NJ, and then go ahead and scan that QR code right on your screen to see more episodes of Roundtable. For all of our crew here at Gateway Center in downtown Newark, I'm Joanna Gagis. Thanks for being with us, and have a great weekend.
Major funding for Reporters Roundtable is provided by RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
Well, that's going to do it for us, for the entire NJ Spotlight News team. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Stay warm, and we'll see you right back here on Monday.
New Jersey Education Association, making public schools great for every child. And RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.